So welcome everybody. Welcome to Briyah Institute. This is our webinar event, so the webinar series. My name is Adriana Machado. I'm the founder of Briyah, a benefit corporation based in the United States that bridges innovation, practice, and purpose to inspire leaders to change organizations and create an impact economy. And what do I mean by impact economy? That which pursues financial returns alongside positive impact for people and planet. So yes, it is possible. Briyah is just a small example of this kind of business as a force for good. The webinar that we're here today is the 13th at Briyah, so the 5th of a series we call the Era of Leadership. And now it's our time to embrace our leadership journey, our unique journeys. And the mindset that I invite you all to have is that of questioning what is, and see how can I do differently, and allow ourselves to act individually and collectively, to continue to evolve, to raise consciousness, to come up with new narratives, new worldviews, and regenerate instead of degenerate, and provide and promote positive impact for our organizations, our society, and our planet. And I propose that we do that by shifting the way we think, going from linear and fragmented to more interconnected and systemic. So we can build more regenerative systems by doing that. And today we are going to be addressing a very important topic to be able to do that, which is governance, good governance in the workplace. And I have very inspiring leaders here that can definitely offer us some good practices to follow through. So it is my honor to be joined today by Ana Paula, Gisela, and Frank. So let me welcome our guests. So Ana Paula is an experienced partner and board member with a demonstrated history of working with companies facing technological and financial transformation. In 2020, she became the first Latina to win the World Women Corporate Directors, WCD, Visionary Award for Strategic Leadership, and was one of 20 global trailblazers identified by the IFC, the World Bank, in 2019. She has strong entrepreneurship, professional, skilled in digital strategy, business planning, newspapers, business development, and marketing strategy. She is a corporate governance and ESG expert and a role model for many, including myself. So thank you, Ana Paula, for being with us today. We also have Gisela Abbam here with us. She's a member of the board at the Briyah Institute. So thank you for helping us make sure the governance of Briyah is good. And she's also the inaugural Senior Director for Government Affairs for Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and India in PerkinElmer. A multi-award winner, including the Black British Business Person of the Year in 2019. So this is a very impressive award that she got. She was also named one of the 100 women to watch in 2020 by FTSE 350 boards. She is the founder and former managing director of OTGA Management Consultancy, the chair of the British Science Association, a Goodwill Ambassador, Global Goodwill Ambassador, and an author who is passionate about making a difference in people's lives. She is responsible for the strategic oversight of the Council of the British Science Association, and she is also a global advocate for the prioritization of health. I had the honor of working with Gisela GE, and we have stayed connected ever since. So thank you, Gisela, for being with us. Last but not least, Franklin Feder, so Frank, my mentor, my dear mentor, in a program called Diversity in Boards, offered by the Brazilian Institute of Corporate Governance, IBGC, and several partners. He's currently serving on boards of directors in both the US and Brazil. So in the US, PACCAR Mineral Technologies, and in Brazil, AES Brazil, CBA, and Pruma, in the areas of transportation, energy, metals and mining, infrastructure, and specialty industrial chemicals. From 2004 to 2014, he served as the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, for Alcoa Inc. in Latin America and the Caribbean. Frank has served and is still serving on the board of NGOs, including Instituto Etos, WRI Brazil, Citaui, and Forum de Empresas e Direitos LGBTQ+. He is an American citizen and a permanent resident of Brazil. Thank you, Frank, for being with us. All right, so we'll kick off by again welcoming our guests and also our audience. Thank you so much for joining us. I see more people joined us, so thank you, Claudia, Alexandra, Daniela, Eric, Jasmine, and all the other ones who joined us. And we're going to start with our guests talking about the why. So let's start with the why. Why is governance and board so important, so relevant? What is it about them that it's worth us having this conversation here and dedicating a webinar to it? So I'll start with Ana Paula. Ana Paula, if you can please share your insights.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you all for being here. So corporate governance are the rules, the practices, the processes by which a firm is controlled and run. So you need to balance the interest of a company and its many stakeholders, and not only shareholders. And this is the first very important issue that I think that we're moving towards. So thinking about stakeholders, you're thinking much more than just your investors and your actual shareholders. You're thinking about employees, you're thinking about customers, the community and the society at large, suppliers, your interaction with government, and your senior management and your management in general. So the board is ultimately responsible. He's the gatekeeper of corporate governance. Since corporate governance also provides this framework for attaining a company's objectives. It encompasses basically all management, from action plans, controls, internal controls, performance measurements, and disclosures. If I can use a metaphor and compare corporate governance to our bodies, I would say it's like the electric signals that the brain sends out so that it can regulate all your body activities and all your functions. It involves the internal and the interaction with the external factors, and it controls the voluntary and the involuntary action. So things that happen that you didn't mean to happen, but it did occur. So it shows a company's direction and its business integrity. Good corporate governance helps companies build trust, and it should protect the longevity of the company, which is much beyond responding to investors and shareholders.
Beautiful, Anna, very comprehensive. And I love the practical example that you offered us, very visual. Thank you so much. Gisela, how about you? Why corporate governance is so important? Why boards matter?
I think it matters really because of all the bankruptcy that has occurred over a number of years for big companies such as Enron, WorldCom. And it was interesting. There was a survey by McKinsey done a few years ago, which interviewed basically over 700 non-executive directors. And about 34% of them said they don't really understand the company's strategies. And so if they don't understand it properly, how can they govern properly? How can they be good governance? Again, from that same survey, 22% of them said they actually don't understand how the company that they're on the board of can actually add value. And so in terms of social impact. So again, that's a big issue. And so I think the important thing is that as governance is important, as Anna describes articulately, it's important that there's accountability. It's important to have an independent viewpoint. It's important that when you come in as a board of director, that you really understand the operations properly, so you're able to ensure that there's good governance, that the company is able to make that impact. And the one big aspect is obviously financial control, that any huge spending is passed through the board. So the board understands it and they have that independent view to be able to decide what should be done next. And then the board should be a critical friend to the CEO and the senior management. So really understanding and help, being nice to them, but working with them to ensure that the company is on track.
Beautiful. So many reasons why, right? From accountability to really taking the company in the right direction. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Gisela. Frank, how about you? Why governance? Why corporate boards?
Well, first, Adriana, it's an honor, satisfaction to be on this panel. I am absolutely humbled, being on a panel with Anna, Gisela, and obviously with you. So thanks for the invitation. Boards are not, in some situations do not exist and are not required. On the other extreme, I understand in states like California, for example, if you have 2 shareholders, you must, by regulation, have 3 board members. That's California, but that's an extreme. I would like to go beyond the regulatory issue about boards. Boards are organizations that set the tone in a company. That's really what boards do, and that's the importance of boards. Just briefly, I was invited a couple of months ago by a company here in Brazil who invited me to join their board, but conditioned on their IPO to occur in the second semester of 2021. And for various reasons, because Brazil, after all, is Brazil and whatever, the IPO will not occur this quarter. And therefore, I got a call saying, hey, Frank, thank you for your consideration. We'll let you know when the board will be formed. And my answer to him was, hey, look, it's not about the retainer fee that you were going to, pay me and the other independent board members. It's about having a board which I believe is healthy for the organization. If the retainer is very important, forget the retainer. Let's get the board together, because the board will learn about the organization and set the important tone as we move towards the IPO. So that's how I like to view boards and the importance of governance in an organization.
Beautiful. And in these times of pandemics, you brought such an important aspect, which is health. So the health of an organization, that's what boards provide. And we have to be so mindful of health these days. Thank you so much. So let's take the temperature and see if our audience is already a director or not. And let's see who is with us today so we can tailor the answers to our questions a little bit more. So we have a poll here for you. So let's take a look at the questions here, the possibilities, and let me know if you are already a director with experience in being in corporate boards. Click on number 1. If it's just you're just starting as a director and this is your first board role ever, please click on number 2. If you're considering joining or is getting ready to join a corporate board, click on number 3. And if you're not considering it yet, but you're curious about the topic, click on number 4. And if you're here just for fun and to learn about a very relevant topic for leaders, click on the last one. And the answer is that, all right, so we have 33% here is already a director with experience in being in corporate boards. Then 22% is getting ready to join a corporate board, and 22% is here to learn about the topic. So we have answers across the board in all the different areas. So we'll try to be as comprehensive as we can, but also go an extra mile for the experienced board members who are already here with us today. So feel free to start asking questions through the chat, because as we go, we will be seeing your questions and we'll make sure to include them in the conversation. So thank you very much for answering the first poll. So I will start with the second question that has to do with leadership. We're talking about the health of an organization, and organizations are formed by people, right? So at the end of the day, we tend to pay more attention sometimes to CEOs than to board members, right? Because sometimes you don't have like one person who it's easier for you to personify everything in the person of a CEO. But what is unique about the role of the board of directors and the role of the CEO? And how do these two roles differ? So I'll start with Frank. Frank, in your opinion, what is the difference in terms of the role of a CEO and the role of the board of directors?
They're very different challenges and very different issues. The only thing that joins both of them is when you take a position as a CEO or you take a position as a board member, when you take that position, you really don't know anything about being a CEO or a board member. I mean, that's the only thing that joins these two things. Apart from that, a CEO is the day-to-day operator, and he is in the business. The board, and particularly the independent board member, not necessarily the lead director or the chairman of the board, but the let's call it the everyday board member. That's a very difficult position because everything that he typically learns about the organization comes through the CEO. Yet he bears full responsibility for the organization. However, as we already discussed, the board member is responsible for setting the tone within which the CEO will operate on a day-to-day business. That's my best attempt in a short period of time to answer your very good question, Adriana.
Thank you, Frank. So I'll say, Ana Paula, anything to add to Frank's explanation?
Well, I totally agree that the board is not responsible for the day-to-day operations and deliveries of the companies. It needs to influence the management and be the guardian of corporate governance. It should have diverse views, fresh perspectives, primarily fresh perspectives from outside the company, from outside the industry, so that it can challenge and enhance the executive manager's decisions by providing new perspectives. At first, board members always represented stakeholders. I would like to challenge that a little bit and say that board members should represent not shareholders, but stakeholders. Because they need to bring out voices that they're hearing in society and weighing the different aspects to ensure long-term growth. A board is asked about making decisions and like choosing a CEO. Ultimately, a board does choose the CEO whenever you change the CEO and several different policies about running the business. But it should think about mitigating risk, identifying and mitigating risk, evaluating strategic options, and investing in different opportunities and different businesses. Again, totally agree, provide the tone at the top for the culture, and increasingly prioritizing social and environmental concerns. So basically, strategy, results, risk, and ethics.
Beautiful. Strategy, results, ethics, and you said diversity, so that's so important. Gisela, you are a very diverse leader, and you have been sitting on boards and seeing the transformation that's going on. So from your point of view, from your perspective, what is different about the role of the board and the role of the CEO?
I think most of the points have been said, which I agree with. I think the only thing I would just reiterate is the fact that the board of directors help to set the strategy. So on the boards I'm on, we spend a lot of time in terms of strategy discussion to really, as I said, set the tone as well. And then also, we also bring a different perspective, ensuring that the company changes with the market environment, because a lot of companies fail because the CEO and the team, they're doing a good job, but they are dealing with the day-to-day operations and sometimes lose sight of the changing dynamics of the environment. So then they lose, even for charities, they lose competitive advantage. So if it's a corporation, obviously it means they are losing their market share. If it's a charity, they start losing funding because people who fund them feel that they are not as relevant and they are not creating that value. So the board of directors bring that perspective, saying, this is what's happening, what can we do to change gear and do something different so that we continue to remain competitive. And I think in terms of the role of the CEO, I think it's been properly explained, so I don't have to add anything to that.
Sure. So like Anna said, you look inside the company for the strategy, set the tone, but you have also the opportunity to bring and make this connection from the outside a little bit more visible. Yeah. And the diversity, if you have that expressed in the board members themselves, then you even have a better mix, a more systemic mix, because you bring the different perspectives to the decision-making, to the collective that is going to be running the show there and helping the CEO stay focused and deliver the results, or the management team to deliver the results. Awesome. So speaking of diversity, that kind of, you want to say something, Frank? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was thinking whether, I should bring it up or not, but, I think examples are always good. And hey, I'm going to cite the name of a company, a Seattle-based company I admire greatly, which is Boeing. I mean, it's not only a U.S. treasure, it's a global treasure. But imagine over the recent times, the issues facing the CEO and the board with regard to the 737 MAX. As the CEO, you were involved inside the company, doing the best you can, and at the same time informing the board, hey, everything is going fine, don't worry about it. After two immense tragedies, look at the issues that the board of this company, Boeing, is facing, or has faced and is facing. It's it's a major challenge to be a board member. I want to reiterate that. Regardless, let's get on to the issue of the diversity, but regardless of gender, regardless of being a board member is a very, very difficult job. Sorry to have carried on like that, Adriana.
Perfect. And this is it. This is an informal conversation. Feel free to add if you have more concrete examples, because I think our audience will benefit a lot from having very specific cases mentioned here. So that's perfect. And in terms of risk, we are used to seeing this risk management role of boards play very clearly in many moments in the corporate lives, right? And now we have this shift towards ESG. So not only measuring risks related to environment, social, and governance, but also going beyond the CSR, the corporate social responsibility, and being a citizen or a corporate citizen that is really respecting certain, not compliance level anymore, but beyond compliance. So certain standards that are being determined now from investors, they're being determined by consumers. So there is a how can I say, an increased demand for certain aspects that weren't considered by corporations before. And you see that board members, not only is a very difficult thing to do and a risky thing to do, but they have to be able to translate ESG into the strategy of the companies, of the organization. So let me start to ask you here again specifically about ESG. So how do you think that board members, Gisela, should be involved in terms of these issues of ESG, and what should be their roles if they are different roles than CEOs? What is your take on that? I'll start with Gisela and then I'll go around.
I think what is important is for the board members to discuss the strategy and really help set some parameters. So I stress on impact measurement and then how it can be monitored. So it means going back to the mission, really challenging the mission. Does the mission and the vision and the current strategy enable the company to achieve ESG and have the proper measurement? So it might help, it might make them start rethinking it and saying that, look, this is what we've been doing so far. We've been focused on just making profit, but we haven't focused on what we can actually do to improve the environment, to improve, social impact, and then obviously have better governance. And this is a discussion that can be, the board can actually push the chief executive and the team to have with the staff, because staff are really involved and really want to be engaged, especially in social impact. There are enough surveys to show that staff really want to do something and want to be working for a company that makes a difference and that they can see that difference. So that's where the board comes in to say, let's look at the mission, ask the questions. Does our mission make us fit for purpose? Will it enable us to achieve the ESG parameters that we're trying to achieve? And a lot of boards are now looking at that and reviewing it internally. And that's where the board of directors come in to really help push that and then develop that impact measurement.
Thank you, Gisela. Anna, your takes on ESG for boards.
So ESG became a buzzword or buzzwords now. But when you look at the data, in the second quarter of 2020, there were $70 billion invested in ESG funds. So ESG became a reality. And you need to understand the details of what ESG will mean to every single activity within a company, and what it means to this global view. And in the recent past, the best companies with the best governance used to have an ESG committee. And it was encapsulated within a committee for those companies that really had good governance. But I would claim that right now, no decision can be made by the board, should be taken without looking at all the ESG concepts. So ultimately, you need to discuss for every single investment, for every single risk, what are the ESG impacts for this decision or this activity. So investment decisions that don't consider environmental impacts will definitely have a negative effect on your ratings. So it will increase your financial costs. It will reduce the long-term capacity for survival of a company. So this is what I mean by real sustainability. What is the long-term impact of your companies? So the responsibility for board members is that we need to learn about what is happening and how we can encourage management to incorporate this on every single decision that they take. So I need to know, for example, what it means, what SASB means. Should we use SASB or GRI? Are they complementary? What are all these buzzwords and all these definitions that are being made, and they are still in the writing? It's not a clear definition of what you want and should follow within your company. But one thing that is essential and that board members need to do, we need to learn about it, and we need to have the company start monitoring and following all these activities and recording. Because if we don't record, if we don't write, if we can't compare and we can't follow.
Yes, beautiful. So in Briyah, we use a lot of systems thinking applied to business. And when you talk about systems thinking, there are certain forces that are the evolutionary forces that comes towards us. So if we fight it, if we resist it, it's going to generate more tension and more disengagement than if we accept it and work around it. So I see ESG as this very strong evolutionary force that is now very, very much close to the corporate world. And as you said, it's not enough to have just one person being the sustainability head in the company or in the committee in the board. All decisions have to be screened against ESG, right? So it's beautiful how matrix it is, how systemic it has to be, and how you have to move and shift from a fragmented perspective to a more systemic perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Let's see, Frank, what do you think about all of this ESG trend in the board?
What can I add to Gisela and your comments? The only thing I can add is my experience, for example, in U.S. boards, is that there's a challenge in terms of incorporating ESG in a practical manner for boards. As all of you know much better than I, the real work of boards are usually done through committees. And then taken to the full board. It's interesting that there's, if you look at any statistic in terms of publicly traded companies in the U.S., there's typically three committees: the audit committee, the comp committee, and then the third is the nomination and governance committee. So when you try to do a ESG committee, the E and the S work well as a separate committee, but then do you take governance out of the nomination committee? Anyway, I just wanted to add that as a compliment to your comments, to Anna and to Gisela. There's a practical challenge in doing that.
And this is beautiful because maybe the way boards have been structured until now is also going to evolve, because it has to be reflected in the board and in the way the board governs itself in a systemic way. So you cannot have it siloed, you have to have it across the board. And the only way to do that is having a systemic approach to how the boards are organized as well, right?
Perfect.
And that reminds me of, since we're talking about systems thinking here, there are three properties of systems that I think we need to be more mindful of when we are redesigning our governance practices and our corporate structures. One is exchange. So usually each system, in order for it to form as a system and to stay engaged as a system, there needs to be balance in the exchange, in what you give and what you receive. So in order for a collective to be working fine, you do need to have that exchange. So the good quality of board members, the good decision making, the feedback and all that plays a role. The other one is order. So usually you have the more experienced people sharing their best practices, guiding. So like we've discussed, there's the role of the CEO in the management and the executive side of it, but there is the role of the collective also guiding and sharing experience. That's why board members are usually more experienced people that are invited to join boards, right? But there is also this notion that you have to constantly evaluate the feedbacks that you get and be able to let this new strategy emerge and not just be totally fixed to something that worked in the past. So I think this is bringing us to this point where it is more systemic and the board should reflect it. Now, let's go back to the title of the webinar itself. We were saying, okay, what should every leader know before joining a board to drive ESG? Because we've mentioned it's difficult, we've mentioned it needs to change to be really more systemic, to produce real impact. So what would you say are like the top things you have to screen for before you decide to join a board? Anna, I'll start with you.
Well, making it personal, I used to say that I liked to be to join boards that had big transformation. And then that became suddenly really easy because every single company is going through tremendous transformation right now. So I think that the most important is for you to first learn and do your homework about the company. I think that it's not about them choosing you, but you should be able to choose as well. You won't be right for every company. So think about which company you have assets that you could truly contribute and really help them become better. I think that's really important. I love saying that you need to make, you shouldn't think of yourself as the second most important coadjuvant, the supporting actor. You're not a supporting actor. Mm-hmm. You must be the lead actor. So your choice, it must be your choice. I want to be a board member. I'll be a board member in any company. Well, maybe that's not the right company for you. So do your homework. Understand how you can add. Don't be afraid to speak out and say what you mean. So you have to feel comfortable within that board situation. A board is a group of people. It's people. So you have to be able to put your idea forward and influence others and really be able to challenge the management. So choose a company that's going through a process where you can add, where you can really make a difference, and do your homework. Always be on top of the theme that will be discussed, read beforehand, study, and in the case of ESG, go study ESG. In the past, we had to study technology. Now it's a given. Everyone must know a little bit about this technology transformation because every company is going through. Now it's ESG. So board members are constantly having to recycle and learn and adapt because the world is constantly changing.
Yes, beautiful. Transformation is here to stay, as you said, right? And that reminds me of the third property of systems that I didn't say, which is belonging, as you said. Not every board is the right board for you. You need to make sure this is the right board because you can add value, because there's some kind of belonging aspect there. And it doesn't mean you have to be equal to everybody because the collective needs the diversity, but there needs to be this connecting part that you will see that it makes sense to you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. Frank, how about you?
Oh, wow. A lot of wisdom in what Anna said and what you just complimented, Adriana. I would just add that what differentiates a board from a great board is something, in my experience, is something called trust. There's got to be an environment created by that board and between the board and the executive leadership of trust. If that trust does not exist, you can be the most competent board member, you can do all your homework and interact or whatever, it probably will not work out. So going back to your question, and I'll just end with this, is you've got to, when you're invited to a board, you've got to do your best, not only to do all the homework and the due diligence, but figure out whether, looking at your fellow board members, whether you believe you can work in an environment of trust.
Right. Otherwise, there is no exchange, like we said, right?
Exactly.
It has to be trust. Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank. Gisela, how about you? What do our leaders need to know before joining a board, especially to drive ESG?
So Anna and Frank have said all the important points, but the only thing I'll add to it is really you have to understand the culture of the organization and of the board, the dynamics of the board. So really get to know the different members of the board, and then spend time understanding the operations of the organization. So even though, you know, there's always been a fine line between management and governance, and everyone keeps on stressing that you should not be managing the board of directors, but if you don't understand the operations well, how can you govern? How can you be responsible for governance? And that's where there's a lot of failure on boards. And so you have to spend time learning every part about it, and then ask so that you can go in to be able to ask the right questions. And I remember my very first board I joined years ago, probably about 10 years ago. I went in, I was nervous, but I said, you know what, I'm going to ask questions, going to spend time to learn. And you can't believe it, through that process, I found out that there was financial mismanagement. And immediately the chair and the board members, oh my goodness, we had 3 accountants on the board and they didn't notice it. But because I knew, I was asking questions, I didn't know anything about that business. I said, I have to learn. So I asked dumb questions, but the dumb questions brought out, what was going on. So it's not wrong for you to ask questions, to find out, just know, and that helps you in terms of being able to be an effective board member.
Beautiful. This is a great characteristic of leaders in general. Ask questions. And of board members, it couldn't be any different, right? Ask questions, even if they don't seem to be the most bright, intelligent ones, but they might lead to something, and you have to constantly be challenging that. So beautiful. So let me remind our audience, please send your questions in. We're going to open for Q&As in a little bit. But before I get there, let me take the opportunity to also ask my guests here about the size of the company. Matters in terms of board? I mean, only big companies should have boards. What about the startups? How, we're seeing this great, the increased number of startups and the increased importance of startups, especially in a changing world, because we need these new technologies to be brought to market, and the startups are really well positioned for that. But should startups have boards? Anna, what's your take on that?
Well, I have a startup and it has a board, and I like that very much. But I would say the following. There are different stages of startups. So the real new startup, in the real beginning, the CEO does everything. You should know very well about this. So he or she has regular meetings with its angel investors or the friend and family, or whoever is financing. So it doesn't really need a board as such. What I think a new startup needs is it really needs an advisory board, someone that will stay with the CEO, because the CEO is a lonely position, and it needs a sounding board. It needs advice on actual processes and implementations and spinning, and really a sounding board where you can test your ideas and check to see if they're sustainable and viable, financially viable. As you grow, and as soon as you have a larger mass of activity, your decisions become more complex and you start receiving money and needing to provide structured information to other people, to other investors and shareholders. At this point, you really need a more structured board, not as super structured like a public listed company, but you do need people who can step away from your day-to-day operations and really provide you with guidance. And you might still need your advisory council, advisory board, but you do need some more structure so that you have a process through which you give back information and send back and discuss. And the structure of it goes gradually being sophisticated until you do have real boards as we know it, with full governance and different committees. And I do believe that you do need that before, much before you go and list it. You know, if a company is ready to be listed, it should have a board a long time ago.
So start with an advisory board and evolve into a more formal board as you grow. And another hint that I would give is look for the B Corp assessment tools, because in the B Corp manual, you know what are the requirements, even for startups, to have good governance. And that starts with having an advisory board, right? And as you said, the board members can be your mentors, can be your guide, can be your counselors into making the decisions that usually the CEO is a very lonely person to make there in that seat. But speaking of mentoring, I will just shift a little bit before I ask the questions I see the audience already posting here. Frank, you are my mentor in the program. And Gisela, you are my mentor because you're my advisory board member at Briyah and you have been with me along the way in building it. So let me take the opportunity to ask both of you a little bit of what is this? How do you find time to mentor and why do you think mentoring is so relevant? So I'll start with Frank and then I'll go to Gisela. Frank, please.
Where do I find the time, Adriana? I mean, I'm I've done my job as a CEO and I have a lot of spare time. And if there's one thing I enjoy, and, I know it's a cliche, Adriana, but I learn more from you than you think you learn from me. I know it's a cliche, but it is so true. Many years ago, before any of you were born, I started a company, and it was a consulting company, not great. It was a consulting company. And, when you're young and you're building a company, you think you know it all. And you think, I don't have time to sit down, be it with a mentor, a coach, or a board or whatever, because I'm building this company. I later sold the company to a consulting company. At the time, it was called Booz Allen and Hamilton. But if there's one thing I regret, and it's something, and you complimented, perhaps Gisela was the one who mentioned it, is having a mentor, a coach, a board, in whatever form it takes, adds so much value. And if there's one regret I have is I did not think of that at that time.
Thank you. I'm glad I did, and I have Gisela to speak about it.
There you go.
It's a mentor in a board or to companies or to entrepreneurs or other people.
Yeah. Look, for me, it's so important. My mission in life is to improve the lives of people. I had so much ill health, and I said, look, I have to do that. Secondly, when I was a young career professional moving up, I never had a female mentor. It was always male mentors, and there were very few women in high positions in the organizations I worked for, and I guess they were busily trying to sort of keep themselves there, so they didn't have time to sort of engage with women. But now there's a lot more about that. And I feel that as a woman, I should help other women, especially students, young girls, female professionals, to really rise up and know that you can start, you know, in a particular career path, but there are other ways that you can equip yourself. And then really the mistakes I've made to be able to share with others so that they can learn. You know, the question they always say, what will you do? What will you tell your younger self? Don't worry, whatever job you're in is a learning experience and you can go different ways. I didn't have a background in science and now I'm chair of the British Science Association. So, you know, you can always do different things and different experiences lead to, you know, success in a way. So that's really...
And I have only to thank you both for being mentors to me and helping us with Briyah Institute to grow strong and nicely. All right, so we have questions from the audience and I'm going to read the two first ones because they do complement each other and then I'll have you comment on them. So first is from Lisha John. How to best build ESG competency across all board members. That the all is unquote. So I think that's an important part of the question. And then from Jose Menezes, a curiosity here. Doesn't it sound a bit strange? Some companies which talk about ESG and have CEOs being at the same time presidents of the board, is it not a clear conflict of interest? So who wants to start and comment on this ESG and having the same person as president and chairman of the board?
Ladies first. Okay. You know, because I'm conscious of the time. I would say, how do you get your board members into a ESG mode? I would say create conditions, or in parentheses, force your board members to get out of the board seats and go visit the operation, or listen and see, and instead of talking, basically listen to the communities, listen to the customers. You gotta create conditions where board members find out more than just in the board meeting when the CEO presents, be it results, statistics, indicators, KPIs, or whatever. Get them out of those board seats. So that would be my answer. With regard to the second issue, with CEOs being part of the boards, I am involved in boards in both situations where CEOs are not part of the boards and others where CEOs are part of the boards. I know this is not a good answer, but it all depends on the environment that is created, on the personality and characteristics of both the board members and the CEO. I don't think there's a simple answer to that issue.
Thank you, Frank. Anna?
Yeah, I agree that ideally, or on the paper, definitely separate CEO and chair. It's not always possible for whatever reason, or it's not always the best option. So you need to have mechanisms to ensure that the best solution is found. So it's not easy to determine, but ideally it would be two different people. And some companies will take some time to get to that for whatever historical reasons there are. So it needs to be analyzed carefully. And I think that I don't remember what was
the ESG. How do you ensure that all
the ESG
board members are?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think I like the idea a lot that Frankly said, go visit and learn and see the real impacts to the real people. I think that that's a fantastic. And we need to do our homework as well. We need to study and learn and understand what we're all talking about.
Yeah, so it's a requirement. So you have to do it yourself, but also have the governance in a way that you will create the environment for that to happen. Yes. Gisela, any comments on those two questions would you like to share with our audience?
I think the only one I want to comment on is the one about the chair and CEO being the same person. I totally agree that that should not be the case, because everything we've talked about being an independent, looking from outside in, negates the fact that if the chairman is in charge, then that person, whether it's a he or she, that person has the final say in a funny way and will then steer, the mood and the discussion and everything. So I agree with Anna that some companies are not there yet, but I think there's more of a push now. A famous company, I won't name it, has just been told by the regulatory body that they need to separate their chair and chief executive because of the kind of issues that are coming up. And I haven't seen that before. So I think there's a move towards that.
I agree. I think it's kind of an evolutionary force we're talking about.
Yes.
So before we close, because it's almost there, unfortunately, the time goes by so fast, I have another poll for our audience. Let's take the temperature again now at the end and answer the following question. So let's have the second poll here up on the screen. So based on the conversation we have here today, what do you consider to be the most important aspect of the role of the board of directors or advisory board? So board independence, diversity, equity, and inclusion, engagement in ESG strategy, transparency and public information disclosure, or business strategy and performance. So it's time for you to vote. 1, 2, and 3. The answer is, all right. So I have a tie there. 38% of our audience believes that engagement in ESG strategy is the most important aspect, but 38% also believe it's business strategy and performance. And then 13% equally believe it's diversity, inclusion, equity, inclusion, and the other 13% believe it is transparency and public information disclosure. Thank you so much, our audience, for voting, for having the answers. And unfortunately, it's time to go. So I will ask our wonderful guests to share a quick message to the audience as closing remarks, please. So I will start with ladies first, Frank. So I'll start with Ana Paula.
Okay, so boards and board members should help companies be successful, grow and be successful in the short and in the long term. So we need to think about short term and long terms. There should be a frank and constructive tension between management and the board. It's good. A good tension, good positive tension is a good thing. And all should work hand in hand for simultaneously optimize its effect on what you said at first: people, planet, prosperity, and governance.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ana. Gisela, how about you? Final message to our audience on boards and governance.
Okay, so one is be a critical friend. Spend time learning about the operations, challenge the status quo, help the company to have proper impact measurement so that you can see a difference. And don't just join anybody. So my don't is don't just join any board for the sake of joining a board. Research the organization, as we've said, make sure that it fits in with your strategy of where you're trying to go, and make sure that it's not something that goes against what you really believe in. Because some people join boards and realize, oh my goodness, because they just wanted to get onto a board.
Yes, that's a great insight. Thank you, Gisela. Frank, how about you? Final remarks?
Yeah, no, I would just add to the wonderful comments that came that companies' objectives are not about making their quarterly numbers. Organizations, companies' objectives are to have a positive impact on society and on the planet. That making the quarterly earnings is a consequence of that, but is not the main objective. And everyone who aspires to be a board member or even a CEO at an earlier stage should understand that. That is probably the most important principle. And I would just add that work is love made visible.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, and my closing remarks is, in order to deliver the impact that Frank has mentioned and all of the different aspects that both Anna and Gisela mentioned here, we need to think in a systemic way. So be systems thinkers when we are leading our organizations from the management positions or from the board positions. And if you need to learn more about how to apply systems thinking to business, come to Briyah, come to the CEO Meet to Master program that we have here, and we will help you get started with that. We'll help you find a good group of like-minded leaders who want to practice that soft skill and start this journey of being a more conscious leader in running either boards or organizations more broadly. So thank you very much, everybody, for being with us today. Thank you so much, Anna, Frank, Gisela, Isabella, who's helping us. Thank you for our audience who's been with us throughout this hour. We will be sharing the recording later and more to come from Briyah. So thank you again.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Briyah.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.